Hello, welcome to BookSquirrel and to another BookSquirrel book review. Da-da-da, ba-ba-bum, BookSquirrel. I don't know. Today we're going to be reviewing Swan Song by Robert McCammon. This is going to be my second review from my top 20 ranked horror TBR list video, which is like actually doing pretty well for itself. I'm kind of surprised how many people are gravitating towards that. So maybe I need to do some more ooky spooky stuff. Or maybe it's just a sign of the season, who knows. And like always, I'm going to be reviewing this book with my ACORN system, which means that I'm going to be talking about the 5 areas of approach, characters, originality. I had to remember my own thing here. Originality, readability, and narration. I've gotten some good feedback that people like this system, and so I'm really happy with that. The one thing I will say is I wish I had a better I don't know. Does originality work for you? Because I think originality is so subjective. What I think is original might not be thought of as original by other people. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it. But anyways, that's the ACORN system. And so let's get into the details of the book. I did read this on Kindle Unlimited. No, that is not an advertisement. I don't want it to be an advertisement. I just want to be open about where I read this. I'm doing a trial, so I'm very glad to know that I didn't spend a dime on this book. And that might be a little hint as to what's to come. So the version of Swan Song that I have was published October 18th, 2011, and is 929 pages long in print. However, the book was originally published in June of 1987, which is important for context. And here is the blurb. Swan is a 9-year-old Idaho girl following her struggling mother from one trailer park to the next when she receives visions of doom. Something far wider than the narrow scope of her own beleaguered life. In a blinding flash, nuclear bombs annihilate civilization, leaving only a few buried survivors to crawl onto a scorched landscape that was once America. The United States America, specifically. In Manhattan, a homeless woman stumbles from the sewers, guided by the prophecies of mysterious amulet, and pursued by something wicked. On Idaho's Blue Dome Mountain, an orphan boy falls under the influence of depraved survivalists and discovers the value of a killer instinct. And amid the devastating dust storms on the Great Plains of Nebraska, Swan forms a heart and soul bond with an unlikely new companion. Soon they will cross paths, but only Swan knows that they must endure more than just a trek across an irradiated country of mutated animals, starvation, madmen, and wasteland warriors. Swan's visions tell of a coming malevolent force. It's a shape-shifting embodiment of the apocalypse and of all that is evil and despairing, and it's hell-bent on destroying the last hope of goodness and purity in the world. Swan is that hope. Now she must fight not only for her own survival, but for that of all mankind. All right, time for the approach. So when I first ranked this, Swan Song I put under DNF potential because of how long it is. And I'm not a huge fan of post-apocalyptic storylines like nuclear fallout. I understand why it was such a common theme in the 80s because of the Cold War, and I do think it's an interesting idea to look at. I'm glad it's in literature. It's just not something that really pulls my own interest. So I was like, man, a long book about nuclear fallout. Okay, well, I'm not very excited about this. DNF potential. I did not DNF it. Okay, I read all 920 pages, and I'm very proud of myself for doing that. From the blurb that you heard, there's a lot of information. It sounds like it's very detailed. It sounds like we're going to be following multiple viewpoints, which I do like, but I wasn't very intrigued by the blurb. It reminded me a little bit of the blurb on the back of Snow Crash, which was also very convoluted and detail heavy. And it scared me about that book. Came to find out that I had a reason to be scared. And it did the same thing with this book. I was like, oh no, okay. Well, but I put it on my TBR list and I spun it and we're reading it. And when I looked at the cover, I really didn't care for the gray. It's kind of appropriate that it's literally just a gray sky out right now. Hence not the best lighting, but I don't care. I would rather have natural lighting. That's just me. when I looked at the cover, I was just like, okay, nothing about this really speaks to me. You've got the really nice yellowy green Swan Song, and I did like that. But the mushroom cloud, it's just the theming, really, that I just was not drawn to. However, in my approach section, I also use the first chunk of the book, which for a 920-page book is a lot. I try to formulate my approach score around the 10% mark, which was literally 92 pages. I will say, though, Robert McCammon convinced me of his skill in writing right off the bat. I said to myself, okay, fine. If there is any book that I'm going to read about this topic and this theme, it may as well be someone like Robert McCammon, who is just really engaging me from the jump. I went from going, I'm not going to be excited for this book, to being really excited for this book. I did a full 180, and effectively he sets it off so well. I was sold. I was sold from the beginning of this book. And so because of that, I ended up giving my approach a 17 out of 20. Those 3 points literally are because of the rest of my approach being pretty bad. But as you can see, most of my score, I am going to consider the reading experience. Okay, characters. Man, characters is such a highlight of this book, and yet at the same time, it's definitely also a drawback. Robert McCammon is definitely capable of presenting new characters in interesting ways, giving them life right off the bat. And they had interesting mantras, the dialogue was interesting and varied, and they really felt like they had their own personalities, right? So I was ready to sing the praises of these characters to the nth degree in my review. I was so ready for this to be my first score in the 90s, and it looked like it was happening. And then the characters kept coming, and then more of them, and then more of them, and then more of them. And I can't believe that I complained about the number of characters in Blind Sight, because this is the book you should be complaining about when it comes to the number of characters. And the thing is that I have already started creating a list of characters as I read to keep track of it. So I'm writing these things down, and I stopped my list at 60 characters, named characters and or titled characters. I did not include any non-named characters, and I still had 40% of the book left. Robert McCammon just keeps doing it. He keeps introducing more and more characters to the point where there were still multiple new characters being named at the 99% mark of this book, okay? And I get it. I think that there's a reason for this. Since everything is so transient in this book, it makes sense. This is a world of danger. This is a world where you might not survive the night. You might not survive turning the corner tomorrow. You don't know. There's so many different threats. And so it makes sense that there would be a lot of introduced characters, because you don't know at which point any of them might leave the story. Although you can kind of figure it out. They might not be wearing red shirts, but you can kind of figure it out. But my biggest character gripe, my biggest character gripe, let me preface it this way. Robert McCammon is very good at saying these are the good people and these are the bad people. He's very good at saying these are the people that are coming together and these are the people that are causing more problems. However, it is my perspective that even if you've established the villain, that doesn't mean that then you just get to do whatever you want through the eyes of the villain and have it just be okay. If you are putting us in the mind of the villain and having them do despicable things, I think that that's interesting. I think that that's cool. However, there is still a line for me. Around the 80% mark, he starts to dial it up to 11. The worst character starts just dropping the N-word and the B-word all over the place. Okay? I think you should know that before you go into this book if you're going to read it. And it makes these chapters where you're in the head of a very despicable character who's thinking these things on every page. Literally to the point where every page you're reading the N-word or the B-word until almost the end of the book. That's what it felt like. And it really bummed me out so hardcore because there were these characters that I thought, even when they were villainous, were interesting. I wanted to see what happens with them, to just not wanting to read it at all. It's obvious that he was doing this for shock value, and he kept them with the bad guy, but that doesn't justify it for me. He's not going to experience these slurs. These do not have identity for this writer, and to then throw it out there, you're ostracizing every single one of your person of color readers. You're ostracizing every single one of your female readers. And for what? You're taking their real trauma and you're using it to sell your book? For shock value? Like, shame on you, man. Like, I understand this is the 80s, but he has an amazing cast of people from different walks of life, from different backgrounds, and they are still very, 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 like, fully fleshed human beings. A little stereotypical, but for the most part, I could sense that it was obvious to me that he was treating these characters with respect. Until then, he stopped looking at the world through their eyes. He stopped giving us their perspectives, and all we were forced to read was this villain's just disgust and grossness, barf, lazy barf. In my opinion, the best villains still have boundaries. In my opinion, if you need to rely on those tropes for shock value, in a world that you've created where you literally say the old rules are gone, and then many years into the story, you are bringing that back out of nowhere when no one in the book was doing it beforehand. Characters was originally going to be 20 out of 20 for me, and now even with these problems, I still see how good Robert McCammon is at creating new characters. He's not good at evolving them, okay? He's not good at taking them to the next level without just becoming problematic, apparently, or incredibly cheesy. Like the second half of this book, we'll get there. So now I give characters a 13 out of 20. Originality. Swan Song is very original. Robert McCammon is very good at creating these new interesting things. We obviously were able to avoid a nuclear fallout during the Cold War, so this is obviously all just fantasy. There's some soft magic systems that he creates in this book, which I'm not entirely sure if I liked those components in the end, but he's very good at presenting ideas. Some of the settings he creates for this book are very original. It does feel like a mix between Game of Thrones and The Last of Us, if you've seen those shows. He's just constantly kind of spewing out new places, new ideas, new households, or whatever, that kind of, as you would get from Game of Thrones. But then you're also learning of these new societies that are kind of coming together or trying to come together as people walk around the country. There's a lot of new stuff that's constantly being presented. What happened to this city? What happened to this stuff? And so originally, this was another category that I was going to give a 20. And then when the tropes happened, the originality fell flat. And I feel like the reason is because when Robert McCammon is allowed to create and introduce, he does a very good job. When he's forced to then resolve things or piece things together to make a resolution, I think things start feeling really forced. So because of that, I did knock off a couple points, and I do give Swan Song 18 out of 20 acorns in originality. Readability. This book is easy to read as far as the language goes. It's got a high accessibility of language, in my opinion. I would say the accessibility really starts to plummet when you look at the length of the book and when you look at the intensity of the book, okay? You are going to be seeing body gore. You are going to be completely encompassed by vile perspectives. The amount of characters definitely makes it hard to keep track of, even when you're creating a list. The length of this book destroys its readability for me. And I'm going to spoil something specific to the structure, by the way, so just a heads up. This book is split into 2 books, and then between books 1 and 2, there is a 7-year gap. And it, to me, destroyed my desire to read this book. And yet I still read through the next 460 pages because this book was still really good at that point. And I thought, well, gosh, okay, But it bummed me out because here I have invested for 460 pages into this world that he's building of danger where anyone could die at any second for any reason. And then he goes, oh, but nothing really important happened and they all survived for 7 years. What? So not only did I feel like it betrayed the very context of the book, but it really caused me to not want to read anymore. It was like hitting a brick wall. And then you start book 2 and you have to pick up speed again and be reintroduced to everything before any of the big payoffs actually happen. The investment ask of this book is absurd. Another interesting thing about the readability of this book is that there's very short chapters, okay? There's over 90 chapters in this book. So some people like short chapters. I like short chapters. I like a lot of space for me to stop. However, when you're dealing with multiple perspectives, a short chapter effectively is a hiccup every chapter. You invest in this person's mind for 10 pages, hiccup. You have to go to this person's mind and reorient yourself to their story and then pick that up. And that slows it down. And on top of that, every time you stop, you're looking at the percentage, or I'm looking at the percentage. How much did I read? And because it's 10 pages a chapter, it's pretty much 1% per chapter. It's like looking at the clock every 10 minutes in a 9-hour long movie. And even that is only 54 intervals of looking at the clock. So it's really like looking at the clock every 10 minutes for an 18-hour long movie. Time's going to feel like it's ticking by very slowly. And yet, in each one of these chapters, things happen. It is interesting. It is engaging. It's just a big ask of the reader that impacts readability for me. I do really want to repeat the fact that Robert McCammon is a very good writer, and he has a lot of really good things in this book. I can see his talent, and I wanted to read more. I would have DNF'd this book if he hadn't been a good storyteller from the jump. So there is a readability factor here. I don't want to just be trashing it, but I wanted to explain why I gave Swan Song 9 out of 20 acorns for readability. All right, narration. Man, okay, I could talk forever about the narration of this book, and I've already been talking forever. So I think I'm going to try to just bullet point this. The tense of this book is third person omniscient, okay? It makes sense for when you have multiple storylines that you're going to be changing perspectives. However, he changes perspectives even in the middle of a chapter, so it becomes very omniscient. I felt like he was much more intentional about this in the beginning of the book. Everything seemed much more intentional. This was like book 1, first child. We are paranoid about everything. We don't want to hurt our child. We're going to do everything right. We're going to be super attentive to them. And the book 2 was second child. Just go play. You're not going to get hit by a bus. The narration is one of the most inconsistent parts of this book for me. It was another area that I was going to give incredibly high scores because the first book, again, I frankly have very, very little issue with the first half of this book. The 7-year jump made me barf on the inside, and then the slow pickup back into book 2 with just disappointment after disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. The payoffs are not satisfying when you finally get to them. To me, they were not satisfying. Robert McCammon does not seem to want his readers to actually feel good when the solutions are happening. There were entire storylines that just fizzled and went nowhere. Why did I read hundreds of pages devoted to this storyline when literally it becomes one sentence in the resolution? What? That's not a really fun experience, especially when you're investing in a 920-page book. That's a big investment, man. And I'm kind of beating myself up for pushing myself. And yes, I take some ownership of the fact that I wanted to read this book as fast as I could for the sake of my channel. I do not recommend anybody that picks this book up to read it that way. This is a marathon. This is not a sprint. And so I think that effectively, if you're able to kind of have a better pace with it, you might likely have a better experience, especially knowing some of the problematic aspects of this book going into it. If you're prepared for that, and if you're prepared for the marathon, and if you like this topic, and you like interesting characters, there's definitely a space for this book in the audience here. And I think that's why so many people do love this book so much. But man, I'm just too sensitive to some of these things. And then there's one thing I haven't even brought up, and I need to tell you this, okay? If you are someone who has a physical difference or are empathetic to the experience of living with physical differences, I highly recommend you do not read this book. There is a message in this book that I find to be incredibly stupid. And that is with the idea that good people are beautiful and bad people have physical differences. And literally there is a plot point, and I will be spoiling this for anybody who wants to hear it. Literally, there is a plot point where people's inner selves come to the outside. And again, if who you really are deep down is beautiful, then you will walk out of this world like a flippin' model. I don't think Robert McCammon understands how completely harmful this storyline is. I think he thinks that this is deep. I don't know. But it perpetuates so much harmful beauty standard BS. Like, gross. One person's soul is literally seen so pure that he ends up getting a perfectly straight bridge nose by nature. One benefit of nuclear fallout, people, apparently, is that if you're a good person, you will get a perfectly straight bridge nose. Barf. Now I understand why the font was green. It's from all the bile coming out of your mouth when you're done reading this. Oh my God. I don't think he delivers in this book, but I can't stress enough. I see the author's amazing talents that he does possess, and it just sucks that when you're writing a 920-page book, you don't have the self-reflection to keep everything to that level. That's why they say kill your darlings. It might be precious to you, but it's going to destroy your story if you can't take a look and go, ooh, maybe I should cut this. And it felt like Robert McCammon just said, no matter what I write, you're going to eat it up. He was either not given any feedback or he ignored it. I don't see how this book exists without someone ignoring their feedback. If you do want to read this book, maybe stop after book one and just say, leave it up to your imagination. You're probably going to be better off. And so having said all of that, I do end up giving the narration for Swan Song 11 out of 20 acorns. I'm kind of treating this similarly to what I did with Snow Crash, which I had a very similar experience with. About 50% of this book was good. And I'm giving it an extra point into 11 for the fact that there are still good elements in the second half, even if it bugged the crap out of me. But just enough. It bugged me too much to give it more than 1 point. So overall, I give Swan Song by Robert McCammon a 68 out of 100 acorns. This book is way better than Snow Crash overall, in my opinion, as far as the quality of writing goes, as far as the quality of character goes, and intrigue and all of that. There's some amazing parts of this book. And if the same considerations that were in the first half of this book in book one were given to book two, this would have been my first 5-star book on this channel. It had that potential, and it had that potential for hundreds and hundreds of pages. If this was a 7-course meal and I ate the first 3 courses and I was like, this is great, I love this. And then I had the rest and I was like, oh my God, I'm too full. I don't like these flavors. And why are you serving me literal poop on a bowl? Like, no. So yeah, and I definitely don't think that this is anywhere near as accessible as The Whistling, which was in the 70s. So I think high 60s for the score here. It really does adequately mirror how I left this book, having read all of it. It is what it is. I will never get those 920 pages back of my life. But it's not too late for you. All right, and having said that, I'm switching things up. I mentioned this in my bookcase reveal video, but I am choosing my next book, and it's going to be Monstrilio by Gerardo Samano Cordova. The reason why I decided to choose a book was because I've decided to implement a new rule on my channel. If I have to read a book that is over 600 pages, or I DNF a book, then I'm allowing myself to choose my next book and not have to spin a wheel. So because I went through such slog, I'm now getting to choose my next book. I'm so excited for Monstrilio. When I did my tier list, this was the book that I was the most excited for. And if I didn't get to read this book this month, no, that was not happening. So hence, I got to make up my own rule, and I think we'll all be happier because of it. I cannot wait. All right, so tune in when my next review will be Monstrilio, about a little demon dude. And until then, I will talk to y'all later. Bye. Da-da-down. Book Squirrel. I don't know.